can getting pregnant mean that you're intentionally homeless? Now, you might think I'm mad for even asking this question, but I did see this advice being given out in one of the big Facebook housing advice groups the other day, and I thought it'd just be useful to do a video about it because there's some interesting aspects to the answer to the question which have much broader significance and would help in lots of other situations as well. And I guess the kind of situation we're talking about when we're asking this question is where you have a household whose home is not big enough for them. They might already be legally overcrowded, but note that being legally overcrowded does not automatically mean you're going to be homeless and therefore able to make a homeless application. But at some point, if the household continues to grow in size, there will be a point where it will no longer be reasonable to continue to occupy the accommodation, therefore you will be legally homeless, therefore you can make a homeless application. And then the council essentially, as one of the parts of their inquiries, will look at, are you homeless intentionally? And it might be that, you could see that growth in household size as a specific deliberate act, to get pregnant and to have another child. And so housing officers have previously tried to advance the argument that you are therefore intentionally homeless because it was the deliberate act which then led to your household growing in size, which then led to you becoming homeless. And in order to, I guess, make sense of this, I would say that there's kind of two kinds of people in the world, it seems. There are people who hear about homeless pregnant women and think, how can we help? And how can we make that mother's situation as good as possible so that she can meet the needs of her child and have a healthier family growing up. But there's also a lot of people out there, it seems, who hear about homeless pregnant women and immediately want to punish them. That seems to be their default kind of deep-rooted response to anything, is to punish them, to basically make them feel bad and make it harder for them to actually kind of move on in life. And obviously that's going to have massive impacts on the mother. It's also going to have massive impacts on the unborn child, presumably, as well. And it's probably worth saying here that pregnancy is obviously a very complicated and private issue, and we need to be very, very careful when we're starting to making claims about what someone's intentions were. The Eastleigh case I'm going to talk about first actually kind of makes a really good point about this, but clearly there are going to be pregnancies which are unplanned, and there are also going to be pregnancies sometimes where domestic abuse is a factor in that woman getting pregnant for a number of different reasons which I won't go into here. So you've got this kind of question of, okay, well, what if someone actually deliberately, intended to get pregnant and increase the household size? But you've also got that kind of question of where that intention was not there, how would they be seen when it comes to intentional homelessness? So in order to try and find the authorities on this, I initially looked at Housing Allocations and Homelessness, which is an awesome book. If you're a professional, you need to have a copy of this book in your team. It's expensive, but it's worth every penny. It's very, very detailed. The primary author is Jan Luber. He recently retired, but he was a very well respected circuit judge. Still well respected, but obviously not a circuit judge anymore. But crucially, the book essentially covers the stuff you need to know to get people housed. So it's not kind of, just some dry law. It's basically, it explains to you how you actually get people housed. Now, there are references to these two cases in this book, but there's no detail. So I went and got on Amazon, got an old version, an old edition of the Housing Law Casebook, which I've already got a couple of copies already. But this goes, I think this was published in like 2002 or something. So it goes, a lot of cases back into the 90s and 80s. And it's in that casebook that I'm essentially kind of drawing from here. I was not able to find the transcript of these cases because they're old. Often with new cases you'll find transcripts of the actual case on bailey.org, so bailii.org, which is an awesome resource. You can sometimes find it on CaseMind as well, and there might be some other ones as well. Swab is another one which can be really good. But I think because these were so old they weren't on there, so I'm basically going on the wording from this Housing Law Casebook, the third edition. And the first case is RV Eastleigh Borough Council XP Beattie. And that's an interesting case because that does crop up in other questions of intentional homelessness as well. But specifically here it's talking about increasing your household size by having children and whether or not you'd be intentionally homeless. And essentially Justice Wolfe also stated that a family cannot become intentionally homeless simply because they have chosen to have additional children. So you notice here that even when they specifically deliberately choose to have more children, that is not something which can come under the ambit of an intentional homeless decision. So that's really good news already. But the other case is potentially more far-reaching, which is Tower Hamlets XP Hoque, Hoque, which was a 1993 case. And in that case, the judge, who seems to be fairly senior, so Sir Louis Blom Cooper QC, found that the decision-making process to find this family intentionally homeless had been tainted by the value judgments of the council's officer, which had no place in the statutory scheme. And you can see that there are a number of ways in which essentially the value judgments that housing officers make find their way into the decision-making process. When I worked at Bedford Borough Council, it was one of the most outrageous things that I saw and I reported on when I blew the whistle there. because you'd have housing officers specifically boasting about denying housing unlawfully to people because of certain characteristics. It might be that they've got an offending history, or it might be they've got drug and alcohol problems, it might be they've got mental health problems that manifest in rather bizarre behaviours, that sort of thing. But they would sometimes, in an open plan office, they would loudly boast about the fact they've just gate-kept someone from the assistance that was owed to them. And bearing in mind, if you've got someone with an offending history, they've served their time. In one sense, the sentence when you get convicted of a criminal offence is to go to prison or community service or whatever. It is not to go to prison and then be treated unfairly by your housing authority. There's not really a justification to send people to prison for breaking the law if the local authority is also breaking the law. It's just, makes no sense, does it? So, as I say, it was kind of something that was fairly common, not in every housing officer, but certainly some housing officers specifically kind of made it their business to use their value judgments. You'd have racism in there as well, where they would use that kind of prejudice that they had to then inform their decisions, which is clearly not lawful. And potentially you would be able to quote either of these cases, but specifically the second case if you're dealing with a situation where it appears that someone is essentially being discriminated against, whether it be on a protected characteristic or not. It's not housing officers' job to, as I say, apply this moral test. It's not a moral test. Intentional homelessness is not a moral test. Neither is any other part of the statute either. They are supposed to gather information impartially and then weigh it up themselves fairly and come up with their decision. They're not supposed to be prejudiced in any way. I would potentially say that the actual pressure on them to kind of protect local authority budgets is probably more of a factor than individual prejudice, but there certainly are prejudice officers out there, so it does happen. So if you're feeling you've been discriminated against, you're actually probably right. I say 9 times out of 10. So, as I say, hopefully these cases were interesting. You can quote them when you are arguing with the local authority. They are, kind of authoritative. If you find this stuff useful, do check out our online training, particularly if you're a professional, but it's not just limited to professionals. If you help other people to get housed, then the online training we do is incredibly reasonably priced, incredibly good quality. We've currently got a rating of 4.9 out of 5 on Trustpilot, which is actually quite hard to achieve because of the maths of it all, but anyway. It's a day long, 9 till 4, online on Zoom, and essentially you will get a chance to hear about the basics of the law, the foundations of the law, the definition of homelessness, the definition of homeless applications and gatekeeping, the definitions of priority need and intentional homelessness and local connection and so on. And you get to ask obviously lots of questions and kind of work it out in some case studies. And it just provides that really good foundation for people who actually want to use the law to get people housed. Now, I'd say if you're actually homeless, I would suggest you might be better off just going through the videos on this channel, because there will often be videos I think that I've kind of put out there about particular issues, so it might be a better use of your time just to kind of go looking on the channel for more relevant videos. It's 30 quid if you're paying for it yourself, and £60 if you're coming in a professional capacity. Please don't try and screw me over with the ticket prices. I've had a few people recently essentially try and wriggle out of the £60 price. It's not really on. Also, if you ask questions in the comments section of the channel, on any video of the channel, I will respond in some way. Please don't share personal data in the comments. Make the question as if it's about a hypothetical person. You might think that's just really pernickety. One of the issues is data protection. I do not want people to have to put their personal data online to get an answer. But the other thing is actually it's a really good way to help people separate out the mountain of issues they've got. When you're homeless, often it feels like one big mess. I've not been homeless myself, but it seems to be what people say, is you've got this confronted by this huge mountain to deal with, some of which are legal issues, some of which are emotional issues, social issues and so on. And it's obviously overwhelming. One of the ways that you can deal with that is to start breaking down that mountain of mess into smaller piles of mess, if that makes sense, one of which will be a legal issue. So by asking, or by getting you to ask the question about a hypothetical person as a what if question, in effect I would say I'm trying to help people kind of eke out what is the legal issue that we can actually respond to. Obviously we can't help in any other way really, but we'll try and give an answer there. If it's a straightforward question, I will probably respond to it in writing in the comments. But if it's a little bit more nuanced and needs a bit more exploration, I'll take it to the next live stream every Thursday at 7:30 PM. You don't have to watch it live, you can basically watch the recording any time. I do my best to index the questions, so if you ask a question, hopefully you'll be able to kind of track where it's been answered on the night, so you don't have to watch the whole thing if you don't want to. Equally, you'd be very welcome in the live stream. There's a nice little crew of people there, just kind of sharing their own experiences and kind of giving people tips about stuff. And if you subscribe to the channel, you'll get a notification when we go live. So if nothing else, do subscribe. It does help, that sort of thing. And I'd also ask as well, if you find this stuff useful, if you're in those kind of Facebook kind of forums, or any kind of forum really, and you see people getting bad advice, which you think, you know, like, for example, oh, you know, you've had another baby, you're therefore intentionally homeless, feel free to share videos like this on those kind of in those forums, because the problem with some of the forums is, even though some of the admins are awesome, there is so much bad information being, you know, flung about that it's difficult for people to actually know what the right thing is. And certainly with a video like this where I'm just quoting kind of old case law, it's pretty safe to say that I'm right about it, basically. Obviously on the more kind of nuanced bits where I'm kind of straying off the legal stuff, obviously, you know, just treat me like a YouTuber. But where I'm actually kind of giving you a case study like this, or a bit of case law like this, it is sound. You can check it out yourself and kind of, yeah, use it yourself in your own casework.